All the Brutes by Sven Lindqvist. I still have problems pronouncing that name. Is a very thoughtful inclination towards how racial superiority had basically annihilated all of Africa. And the way this book, the reason why I gravitate towards this particular book is the reason that goes way back in my sophomore year is when we choose modernity as our course, and this there is a reading from this particular book, and it really moved me. And at the time, I did not completely read the book, but when I got the chance to actually read the book, it was a very insightful experience altogether. Secondly, this book directly links with what are the objectives of the socialization and cultural identities course in terms of how it tends to tell us about the way certain groups view themselves. So, with that being said, I am your colleague Muhammad Ali, and today we'll be reviewing Exterminate All the Brutes by Sven Lindqvist. So, in Exterminate All the Brutes, Sven Lindqvist presents some haunting mixture of travelogue, literary interpretation, and historical analysis, the purpose of which is to expose the roots of 20th century Holocaust in the ideology and practices of 19th century colonialism. Originally published in Sweden in 1992, the book uses Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness as a vehicle for a rather unique inquiry. According to Lindqvist, the most potent darkness in Conrad's novel is not that of a primitive Africa or some inner recess of human nature abstracted from history. It is that of a European colonialist themselves, pointing out the word Europe itself as it is rooted in a Semitic word for darkness. Lindqvist argues that the 19th century imperialism sought not to improve the lives of various native people, but rather to hasten their extinction. Thus, for Lindqvist, Kurt's final recommendation in The Heart of Darkness, Exterminate All the Brutes, represents one essence of European thought. It is a supposed solution to the task of the European countries in Africa and neatly sums up the violence at the core of colonial aspiration and imperialist aggression. Part travelogue, part fiction, and explicitly not a contribution to historical thought. Lindqvist's book is an Lindqvist's book is an account of the way that European colonialism and then more recently imperialism has subjugated the populations of other countries. His analysis basically differs from a Marxist one, and he doesn't argue that the problem lies within a system of completing the competing blocks of capital itself, but is a story no less painful. It doesn't hide from pointing out the fingers of blame and governments and individuals who were prepared to commit genocide in the interest of the nation state. Exterminate All the Brutes focuses largely on the growth of racism and the impact of racial theories put forward by anthropologists and scientists. Discussing the work of Cuvier, Marivelle, and Darwin, Lindqvist reveals all racial theories were often directly linked to imperialism and used as a tool to justify territorial expansion and extermination of aboriginal populations. So, the theories of racial technological supremacy provided Europeans with belief in their own cognitive and physical superiority that resulted in policies taken towards Aboriginal people during conquest were, in a sense, justified by Europe's belief in the natives' subordinate being. Lindqvist points to the growth and spread of racial science in the 19th century and draws a direct relation between theories of European global expansion and the Holocaust of the Second World War. Once again, Lindqvist exposes the bloody history of colonialism and imperialism. His book is unusual in its style, but its format doesn't detract from its content. There are few positives in Lindqvist's accounts. He doesn't mention those people who stood up against slavery, colonialism, racism, and genocide, often a great cost to themselves. And nonetheless, the useful demolition of those who argue that empire and colonialism was beneficial to the majority of population, this book clearly is a rhetoric of response. So, Conrad's writing of Heart of Darkness forms a fixed point for Lindquist's account. He discusses the writings and activities that took place around the time that would inform Conrad's account of massacres in Africa. Then he looks at the rise of racism and how Darwin's evolutionary theory was used to justify genocide. The author describes how one member of the British scientific establishment saw the future, and it's quoted: Africa will be shared between England and France. Under European rule, the Africans will dig the ditches and the water the deserts. It will be hard work, and the Africans themselves will probably become extinct. We must learn to look at this result with composure. It illustrates the beneficent law of nature, then the weak must be devoured by the strong. Such scientific distortions were all too common in the 19th century. Their influence on colonialism, slavery led to the deaths of millions and the pillage of entire continents. But the author is keen to explore the links between the historical past and more recent genocides such as the Holocaust. Lindquist argues that the Holocaust, in the sense of colonial massacre of millions, is far from unique. Indeed, he suggests that we want to see the Holocaust as a unique act so that we can avoid the reality of our own national history, a most comforting thought, he says. Lindquist also points out that, and it's also quoted, Hitler and all the other Western people in his childhood breath was soaked in the conviction that imperialism is a biologically necessary process which, according to the laws of nature, leads to the inevitable destruction of the lower races. It was a conviction which had already cost millions of lives before Hitler provided his highly personal application. Unfortunately, at least for me, I think this analysis is only partial correct. The Holocaust was unique, I agree, because it was the only industrially organized genocide that lies rooted in the rise of fascism. However, that said, it has links to the past, and as Lindquist suggests, other imperial powers are certainly not innocent. Fascism is a particular aberration of capitalism, but it is more simply than a violent version. So, Lindquist enriches his analysis by linking colonial practices to evolutionary theory and social Darwinism. The discovery of natural selection, with its long history of mass extinctions of species, could easily be justified the disappearance of less fit branches of human family. This mindset later becomes the basis for Nazi genocide. Thus, for Lindquist, the roots of Nazi atrocities lies in the mainstream practices of European and American expansion, both of which involve the wholesale decimation of native people. Underspurred throughout the book are serial accounts of Lindquist's travels in North Africa, along with Joan Tate's graceful translation from the Swedish. This provides literary depth and an air of intrigue as we discover with horror that the fingerprints on the smoking gun of Holocaust are our own. Linguist provides an unorthodox and valuable contribution to historical research. And the more one reads, his book challenges readers to look deeper into the fabric of history and understand how the world, complicated and intricate, is linked and interconnected on more levels than one may perceive. Lindquist also contends that the Holocaust, while unique in its own circumstances, shared many of the same beliefs and theories of European global expansionism. While the Western world wants genocides to have begun and ended with Nazism, Lindquist challenges readers to look beyond the Holocaust and understand while also comprehending the larger role of Europe within global affairs. Lindquist believes it is not knowledge we lack. What is missing is the courage to understand what we know and to draw conclusions. Therefore, Exterminate All the Brutes is a unique book full of valuable concepts, theories, and personal attributes that catch the reader's attention and force them to think about Europe's role in the world differently. Lindquist's Odyssey into the Heart of Darkness is essentially a journey into the hearts of European imperial policies, designed to rid the world of inferior races, at least what they thought, and create room for the superior race. Lindquist's approach is unconventional, I would agree, and splicing historical events and the description within a travel narrative through the Saharan desert is something which deserves praise. However, the reader is also confronted with a highly personalized style, adding a touch of humanity to a grim and sobering subject. The author weaves historical events and concepts around the town he passes through, creating a link between the world of the present and the world of the past. Throughout the bus rides, hotel rooms, and childhood memories, Lindquist outlines the theories of scientific racism, European technological superiority, and the role of extermination in European colonial affairs. The reason why this book basically provides a good reflection is the way he also enumerates several visual depictions of lesser known events to the general masses, and the way this is presented creates a cathartic experience for the readers to understand the tenacity of the subject, the gravity of the subject itself. And therefore, I believe that this book plays an integral role in painting a picture which we almost forgo because of our modern tendencies to relinquish the past and move on. I hope this book review summarizes the book entirely, but I would really recommend that you read this book because it truly is an eye opener. For me at least it was. I hope this was an engaging session. Thank you so much for listening.